I think whichever way you look at it, both Harry and Meghan felt, without a doubt, that the British monarchy was about to crumble the minute that they decided to hand in their resignation, you know, the sort of thing. They thought with Megxit, as it was dubbed, that, well, how could they possibly survive? There they felt, you know, the younger people, as it were, just, well, trailblazing the way because they've had a couple of successful tours, and Meghan apparently was the darling that everybody loved. And then, of course, things were starting to leak out, and negativity was creeping into the equation. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you think about that, it only takes a couple of years for the truth to come out. The thing that I feel particularly sorry for is the fact that Her Majesty the Queen had to have her legacy so badly tarnished, really, by these two individuals. I would have thought that the Duke of Sussex would and should have known better. You obviously don't expect that from Meghan Markle. She came in with literally a mantra to be the biggest star on the planet. She wanted the fame that the royal family could offer, but of course it didn't fully come her way. So on today's By Royal Appointment, I want to take you through what I found out by delving further in, of course, to the files and looking exactly as to what really went wrong and exactly how did she, given the fact that she was given so much as an entree into the British monarchy, truly get it so wrong. I mean, it is incredible. And also, you know, the fact that clearly Harry and Meghan, well, whichever way you want to look at it, clearly do want to destroy the British monarchy. They've done everything in their power so far. And let's not forget, we have a king struggling with his own health issues. But that's by the by. It's always about the two of them. Plus, I'll reveal exactly how Meghan really would like to, well, make life incredibly difficult for His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, Prince William, and has tried on numerous occasions. And according to a source, hasn't totally given up yet. Let me explain. Hi, good to see you today. Thank you so much as ever for joining me. Nice to have your company. And as ever on By Royal Appointment, if you could like, share and comment respectfully. You know, there's the story goes, isn't there, that basically, you know, Meghan Markle and the Queen got on incredibly well, right? That's the imagery that we got. And I think we all fell for that, and myself included, when we covered that particular train journey. Do you remember the infamous train journey where Meghan clearly had not made any efforts at all, really, and just decided, well, this is the thing. The Queen, of course, looking elegant and resplendent as she always did on public engagements and privately too, but, you know, just knew exactly what the public wanted to see. Meghan looked like she just popped out from putting something in the oven. You know, where was the hairstyle? Why was it all flowing around? There was just no courtesy. And even on the day, pushing into the car, if you remember, ahead of the Queen. And this was also the narrative that she was giving out, that, well, nobody told her what to do. Endless people had told Meghan what to do. She'd refuted all of their help because she wanted to do it her way. And what was interesting was she didn't care whether the Queen was the Queen or not. As far as Meghan was concerned, you know, she was going to be the new Queen. Now, I would say that Prince Harry has to take some responsibility for this because he literally let loose this sort of open cannon that she could have what she wanted. The infamous line, you know, the sort of thing. And this literally built up because she felt that, well, she was going to be the Queen's favourite. Everybody knew that Her Majesty the Queen got on incredibly well with Sophie Wessex, as she's known or called still to this day, but now, of course, the Duchess of Edinburgh. And after a long time and getting to know and trust, then she got on incredibly well with the then Duchess of Cambridge, now, of course, Catherine, the Princess of Wales. But Catherine also gave masses of respect and realised that you don't become friends with the Queen, you have to earn that respect. Meghan hadn't got time for that. She was just going to push right in. And from the off, you see, she'd done a lot of homework. And this is why it doesn't tally with the situation, what she's always trying to put out there, that nobody told her anything. You see, as she'd done with Harry, she'd done a very clever, thorough research job. And the job basically was to say, well, you know, I'm a dog lover, I like architecture, I like books. She'd studied the Queen. And the one thing that she knew the Queen truly loved was animals, not just horses, but of course her beloved corgis. And it wasn't just the corgis, you know, she liked all animals, but the corgis were the thing that she was universally known for. Now, what was fascinating was, you know, Meghan very quickly decided that this could be the way in. And even Harry mentions in his book about how the corgis gave her the best treatment. Well, of course they did, because Meghan, according to a very well-placed source, made sure that she had some of her favourite snacks to hand to give the corgis. Well, this came, as I say, from an excellent source. And this, of course, would have placated them, because I'm sure Her Majesty the Queen would have known that this was going on. But nonetheless, there was Meghan patting away, and apparently the corgis adored her, and that apparently was the seal of approval. Not quite. You see, after that particular meeting, apparently the Queen decided that Harry, perhaps a little bit like Prince William, well, perhaps he needed to slow down a bit. Now, he wasn't going to blow a gasket with the Queen because, that wasn't the way, but he couldn't understand it. Who put this thought into her head? Wasn't she terrific? And in Harry's eyes, she was, of course, Princess Diana Mark II. You get the picture. So moving forward, this was already a seed of problem. Now, this wasn't one, according to the source, that Harry shared with Meghan. He simply told her that the Queen adored her, and now, it was a seal, a fait accompli, as simple as that. Then this happened. One of the issues Meghan had with the Queen was that she felt, well, she'd offered, a breath of fresh air into the family. And she truly felt that really this was the way forward. After all, the Queen was well into her 90s at this point, and seemingly, of course, Meghan had already cast her eye around to see how she could reimagine this brand. I mean, after all, she'd been successful, right? She'd been on an NBC soap, and more importantly, well, she had that lifestyle vlog, The Tig. I mean, why wouldn't you turn to her to make sure that you could rebrand one of the oldest institutions in the world? And this is truly where it gets interesting, because both her and, as I said, Harry is to blame for this as well. They believed that they could literally modernise the monarchy between them, and he went along with it. Now, my surmise on this is that I think he would have said and done anything to keep her happy. He was like a lovesick puppy, and when I went on that particular press jaunt where they were going up and down meeting people in the country, he was giving it to her. He was standing well back even at that point, making sure that she felt that she was the superstar that she felt she should be. You understand what I'm saying? She just had to be number one all the time, and Harry had very quickly learnt that lesson. But you see, what was interesting was there was a little bombshell that came from Her Majesty's office. And the bottom line really was that when would they be meeting the family? And this really accelerated a problem for Meghan Markle, because clearly she had not anticipated that. Now, naturally, the Queen herself wouldn't have gone into such ramifications to dial people up, etc. But she kept pressing Harry, well, what about the family? And they were told, well, there's basically Doria and, of course, Thomas Markle. And the story that the Queen, and I've got this from excellent sources, was told us that she had a very loving, close relationship with Thomas, so much so that she felt, delighted, apparently, that the Queen would like to meet him. But as many people know, Meghan Markle likes to present a different veneer to the world. She desperately wants to have a new look, clearly at points embarrassed about her history and her past. You see, the bigger picture was this, that the Queen sensed something very quickly. Now, where it got interesting was, as you know, the Queen broke royal protocol by allowing Meghan to spend Christmas with the family, and this really raised eyebrows. But behind the scenes, there was a bigger picture, you see, because now this word of biracial was being bandied around, the first woman of colour inside the British monarchy. And naturally, in that very indelicate time, if you cast your mind back 7 years, people didn't necessarily want to overstep the mark. And it's my belief, according to a person who worked closely with the Queen, well, she didn't really want to put a foot wrong, and she felt, well, okay, well, let's go down this route. This is the modern age, you get the picture. So consequently, Meghan went up and had the Christmas, but she made quite a few faux pas up there, including failing to thank the Queen. And by that, normally you send a wonderful card, a letter or something like that, saying thank you so much for your hospitality, etc. And in return, you would have received something from the Queen. This came eventually after being politely prompted, but then this caused a problem with the courtier, because nobody tells Meghan what to do. You can see that she wanted to do things her own way. Now, again, Meghan's looking around and wondering who's telling tales, not knowing that, this would just be common courtesy. Quite why it wouldn't be in any country, I really don't know. But that's the story. Now, her main enemy at that point was none other, of course, than Prince William. And you see, it had got back to her that, well, he was suggesting to his brother that, he should slow down, stop pushing. But Meghan wasn't wanting that. I mean, as everybody knows, and it's there documented because she said it, she said yes before Harry had finished even proposing. She wasn't going to let this lucky charm slip through her fingers. And according to people who knew her at the time, including former press agents and managers, she knew that this was the break that she'd been looking for. This was going to open every single door that was required to make her a star. Never at that point was there any sort of story regarding these people who were working with her at the time about her giving everything up and becoming a dedicated member and of course just hitting the ground running. That was genuinely, openly, all for the cameras, allegedly. And the thing was, it was very clear. Now of course Her Majesty the Queen, savvy woman, been round a long time, was just waiting for the moment to find out exactly when this might change. But Harry kept assuring her that no, Meghan's in it, this is the thing that she wants to do, quite happy to give up the back life, etc. But then, as I told you, Meghan decided that she felt she could do a lot to help the monarchy. And first of all, she tested the ideas out with the Prince of Wales, Charles. But of course, Charles has been at this game also a very long time and just humoured her. And he liked her in the beginning, it has to be said. He found her charming, effervescent, and very interested in certain elements of what he was interested in, architecture, the planet, etc. But Meghan is very good at manipulating and reading people. When you see her being interviewed, you will notice that she mirror images the stories. So if you've had a problem, she's had a similar problem, and normally has done enough research to have the same problem before you've brought it up. You understand how that works. But of course, for the moment, Charles decided, well, she was making his son incredibly happy. But behind the scenes, William and Catherine were hearing terrible reports that would come up then by Jason North. And what was interesting behind the scenes of that is that Jason very quickly became the number one enemy, even though he'd been very instrumental in assisting with the book that apparently Meghan forgot she'd assisted with. People forget that she's been proven to be an outright liar. And then the next episode was this. As Harry was darting back and forth to Toronto to play, of course, Cupid for his latest squeeze, Meghan Markle, who was appearing, of course, in the TV soap opera that was Suits, there was one thing that kept niggling him, you see, because, well, basically, according to a source, well, he'd never really met any of Meghan's friends. He'd met the cast members and he'd been on set and, he'd had to sign NDAs and stuff like that. And he quite liked it. Suddenly he's been treated as a normal person, he's not Prince Harry. And Meghan made very sure to make sure that his title was used as and when it suited her. But basically she kept pointing out to friends on set, makeup artists, dress people, stuff like that. No, she wasn't impressed. It was just a man that she was having a relationship. At this point, you have to remember, nothing was too secure. Meghan wanted to play it incredibly cool, making sure that Harry kept running back, kept coming back. But over in England, when Meghan kept coming over and staying at Kensington Palace, what was interesting was she was obsessed with never leaving her phone. Never ever leaving it around because she was convinced that people might want to look at it or indeed snoop on it. They pointed out that no staff member would want to do that. But Meghan, as she pointed out in the Oprah Winfrey interview, basically said things were taken away from her at a later stage. You get the picture. Clearly, Meghan didn't want to see any numbers or let anybody see any numbers flying up, particularly as she was still keeping all of her showbiz entourage literally behind her, including agent, manager, publicist, that sort of stuff. She was unsure at this point whether she could convince Harry to be the one. Now again, where this gets really interesting, and this is exactly how manipulation works, some people might say, is one by one, all of Harry's friends literally were scored away. And they were sort of long-term friends that both Harry and William had grown up with and couldn't understand. But you see, Meghan had decided that actually many of them couldn't be trusted, particularly in this new era, and they were planning a life together. And suddenly, she didn't like certain things. particularly this sort of hunting, fishing, shooting style stuff. She certainly didn't want to go up to Balmoral and do that. That didn't work with her at all, and very quickly that was squashed. Also very quickly was Prince Harry's smoking habit. She found that not very nice, but now that's come back with a vengeance, but with something totally different. You get the picture. Now, where it gets interesting is, one by one, these friends literally were shot of, as it were. But this is because Meghan had a tactic. She would invite them over, be as nice as pie, according to a source, maybe dinner, all that sort of stuff, and then either complain that they didn't like her, or perhaps they weren't particularly nice to her. You see the manipulation. Now, when you're in that situation where you really like somebody, the bottom line is, and this has happened many times in relationships, I'm sure, that suddenly you have to decide, well, is this person the sort of person I thought they were? Do I want them in my life? So one by one, they were all gone, to the point really where it was just simply her and him. Now back to the wedding problems, because suddenly the family reared its head again. And the family actually thought they were all going to be invited. And there was plenty of space in St. George's Chapel. In fact, the Queen literally bent over and basically, unlike William, because of course he's the heir to the throne, well, Harry had more sort of relaxation about the sort of people he could invite. According to a well-placed source, Meghan was already telling people back home that actually space was going to be limited for family, and she would have to be very selective about who she could invite, set in the stone already. When Prince Harry said, well, who would you like to invite? Naturally, she mentioned her father. And he, of course, did that now famous phone call. That's the only time they've really spoken. What's interesting about that, though, is the particular phone call is, while Thomas Markle, wanted to meet him, naturally, and was more than happy to go to any lengths to meet him, well, very quickly, all that meeting was shut down. According to sources, well, Harry still wanted to do the honourable thing and ask him in person. And I can understand this. If you think about it, he's well brought up, he knows the procedure, he wanted to do it. This set Meghan panicking in panic mode, because clearly she had a bigger plan further down the line. Now, the problem was that with the wedding, the Queen then got involved and said she could do with a list of who Meghan wanted to invite. And at this point, and this is in, I believe, Kensington Palace, that they were sitting down and making a list. And this was the first time that Harry actually saw the fact that, well, there were going to be major celebrities. Yes, the George Clooney's, the Oprah Winfrey's, the sort of people. The list was far bigger than that, though. Oh, definitely. There were a lot of movers and shakers, bigwigs from Hollywood, studio heads, things that they'd never met. But at this point, you have to remember, they'd already started the tenuous links of talking about what they were going to do after they departed the monarchy. Meghan had already sown that seed, but assured Harry that this was going to be way, way down the line. But if they made these connections now, and they came to the wedding, consequently these deals, these ideas, etc., were going to be a lot easier further down the line, again, allegedly. Hence the reason you saw, even though, as Oprah Winfrey has stated herself, that Meghan didn't want to do the interview because it wasn't the right time. So she was there because there could be a good time. You get the picture. Most of the friends that did turn up at the wedding were there because, of course, they supported Harry, including exes, Cressida and Chelsea. And as I told you in a previous video, Meghan didn't want that. But also, it was difficult for her to say no because it would have made her look really curlish. Harry said they were part of his life, very much part of his development, and had been a great help to him after, of course, the sad demise of his mother, Princess Diana. And how could she possibly refuse that? So the wedding list went ahead. But as we saw in the Netflix series, then what happened, quite frankly, was, well, the niece got disinvited. And apparently Buckingham Palace told her to do it. Again, absolute rubbish. So why did Meghan go down this particular route, wanting to remove elements of her family? And why truly was Doria the only person allowed? Well, Prince William's antennae was up at this point and wanted to confront Meghan. Basically, Meghan had said that, she didn't know if she could invite these people. Nobody explained, perhaps they couldn't afford to come all this way and they were not going to be used to this level of, scrutiny. William understood this, but said they would be very much looked after, protected, and who would she like? Meghan, according to the source, said she would get back to him, but William knew that this was never going to happen. Once again, according to the source, well, he tried to have a word with his younger brother, but Harry wasn't listening. And then, of course, this happened. One of the biggest failings, in fact, that Prince William did was to decide to confront Meghan Markle. See, Meghan knows exactly how to play the game. She's been in this a long time. And William took an opportunity while in Kensington Palace to grab Meghan alone. Now, that wasn't difficult because he'd already noted, spotted, and no doubt was very much aware that Meghan would do anything, in fact, to get some private time with William. She realised that he was the future. Right? I mean, it's all very well having the Prince of Wales walk you down your aisle on your wedding day, but that's, not the future. And very quickly Meghan decided that, well, in order to keep everything together, she needed to make sure she got William on side. So consequently, when he sat her down for what seemed to be like a friendly, informal chat, bang, he went for the jugular and brought up the fact that there was now a list of complaints about the way that she's been treating the staff. She referred to them allegedly as servants. He said, no, they are people that work for us. They're not servants. She said, well, that's what I was told they were. Interesting, isn't it? You see, and I would believe that, well, in my opinion, that Meghan, you see, will have read some history books and realised that they were called back in the day, of course, royal servants. But now this was a different time. They were on the same level. They were simply working to assist the monarchy, the way it ran, etc. William had a very long list, all thanks to the fact that it had been supplied by what she considered to be a friend. You know the friend I'm talking about? The one that seemingly then had assisted her with the book. And this had been going on for some time. Now, when you look at it and you break it down, the biggest thing really, I would say, is that she'd found finally, people to do her beck and call. She thought, wow, this is it. I've hit pay dirt. These people are going to look after me. And then the demand started. Now, I would say this is no different to working from any celebrity that I've worked for. They send you emails at all hours and expect you to, respond. And if they don't like something, what you're going to do about it. They're just very, very demanding. You earn your money. Hence the reason one might say that I wasn't particularly good at that level of the job, right? Because it didn't matter what you did, it was never good enough. As I've said to you before, you could get them on the front cover of Vogue, but what about Tatler? What about Elle? What about Life magazine? It's never, you're always being pushed to the max. And this truly was what was happening behind the scenes with Meghan and those servants, staff, whatever you want to call them, right? Now, what then happened was he confronted her and was very, very blunt about exactly the way that things operated. But you see, this had really been instigated, not exactly from, indeed, Prince William, but in fact from instructions from our late monarch, Queen Elizabeth. She'd had direct info, literally, from an excellent source, as you can imagine, that this was going on. And she didn't necessarily want to rock the boat herself. That really wasn't because she wasn't her thing, but she felt, well, could somebody else, and perhaps, of course, William, have a chat with Harry? Before he got an opportunity to do that, she'd very much gone back to Harry in floods of tears. William's been dreadful to me, and we saw that when you saw the Netflix thing. He showed her the text, well, he's your brother, So you could see the narrative that Meghan allegedly was now playing. But that got worse because when, of course, William decided to have that now informal chat with Harry, he exploded, saying that Meghan had been very depressed, felt very much cut off and wasn't too welcomed by the family. A narrative that she spun once again, literally, when she said on television that she felt suicidal and, was literally on her own. But this again is a false narrative because, as I've pointed out, time and time again she was offered the opportunity and areas to stay for so-called friends. But she didn't want any friends to come to the palace, or indeed, Buckingham Palace, Kensington Palace, Nottingham Cottage, whatever, because there were people around, and she figured that people around might actually want to have a conversation, and perhaps these friends might simply just slip up and say the wrong thing. This was where William, in my opinion, got it wrong. He could have really nipped this in the bud very quickly, but decided to seize the moment because, as he pointed out, and I was told from an excellent source, there was never truly a moment where you could get Meghan alone. She always made sure that either Harry burst into the room or she was in the middle of a call or, just never quite so you could pin her down to a long-term conversation. At that point, let me tell you, the whole relationship broke down, but not too long. You see, Meghan again had realised that the only way to move forward in this brand new game of Monopoly that she'd now entered was to make sure that she made friends with William. Catherine could pick her up whenever she fancied, but William was the top cheese. Now, what happened next is really interesting because you see, she decided to write a letter to William. And the idea was to apologise for any misconstrues, etc., that sort of thing, you know. Now, that letter does exist, and William has it. And basically, this is a vital piece of information to claim or say, you know, that she does take ownership for some of her, shall we say, negativity in dealing with people that she was now very closely associated with, who were simply trying to help her in her brand new role within the monarchy. But once again, Meghan decided to turn another corner. And what they noticed at the palace was, and they planted, you know, various things, whatever suddenly was to the ears of Harry and Meghan suddenly got to the ears of the media. You know, these terrible private parties that apparently the media were invited to. Well, seemingly who was telling the media? Because it was not the people inside the palace. William really knew exactly now what he was dealing. One of the things that Meghan Markle's always thought about herself, according to good sources who've worked with her, is that really no man is, well, immune to her charms. From a very early age, and ever since she remodeled herself, to put it politely, you know, with the no traces now of her 43% Nigerian heritage, a brand new teeth, a overall sort of makeover, and I'm not knocking that, lots of people do it. Well, clearly she feels she's in her A game, as it were. And by the time she got into the British monarchy, she felt she was looking her absolute best. I mean, there she was, contorting herself in yoga pictures all over Instagram. And you can understand, as ever, how allegedly Prince Harry said, "Look what I've got," as if it was some kind of trophy to stick next to one of the deers on the wall type thing, you know? Just incredible when you think. And this is really what perplexed Meghan with regards to Prince William, because he's a good debonair looking chap, you know, and you have to look and think, well, he will have met the most beautiful people in the world, even at this point. All these stunning actresses that will all be goo-goo-eyed at him simply because of what he is and what he is about to become. It happened to Charles. I remember as a kid seeing pictures of him literally on the beach in Australia and meeting Farrah Fawcett, who was the massive, biggest international sex symbol at the time. And Farrah was just literally besotted because he is who he is. This is the thing. William knows this all too well, particularly in this 21st century world, and he was having no truck with Meghan Markle. She very quickly established the fact that the normal winning techniques of being, you know, mega enthusiastic, Google eyes, looking directly at him, making sure, of course, that he's got her undivided attention, and that she's done much of her homework. The sort of thing that reeled in, of course, Prince Harry, you know, because all of the things about, you know, he was late and she was about to go, this was the number one thing of this. There's no way she was going to let that bag of money go out the door. But again, we've seen how Harry will let her have this particular narrative, right? And that's a fascinating bit. He will give in to anything. But back to William, once you realise that actually, well, this isn't going to work out in her favour, the only thing she could do really was to separate the two, as she'd done right from the start. And the bottom line was that, you know, she pointed out that William didn't like her and he wasn't welcoming, and as ever, I have to say allegedly, failing to mention, of course, at this point that he'd run her and basically presented the facts about how difficult she'd been to work with. Now, as I said, there's two sides to every story, but I've spoken to a lot of the staff that literally were working there at the time, and they are, you know, shall we say, disheveled. There's two things behind that though. A lot of the people that work inside that level of business, sometimes it's possibly their very first job, and they're used to being treated with the utmost respect. They come from respectable aristocrat families. So, you know, somebody being, you know, kind of brazen and brusque and things like, it's not the world that they would know. And why should they put up with it in any work level, either way? But this is the thing that she felt, Meghan, was the way to maneuver, manipulate, and of course conquer. It didn't work. So moving on, once she decided that William was certainly not going to be very susceptible, and this was really the finite time when their very final appearance together as working royals, that's a loose term, isn't it? At the Commonwealth event, Meghan at that point just had resigned herself to the fact that this was one thing she was never going to be able to achieve. But she wasn't done with William. People like Meghan are never done with people. If you cross them, then they basically make sure that in their eyes you're finished. Look at Jessica Mulrooney, a chum for years, very useful to Meghan, cast aside like a piece of old J-cloth, you know? And now the same thing she figures she could do with William. Only recently we saw the fact that he was branded work shy by the very much appeasing New York Times, right? Where do you think that came from? And you see, the bigger picture is that both Meghan and Harry truly believe in the fullness of time that William will have to eat some kind of humble pie to lure them back, to get them back in. Because consequently, in their eyes, they are still the superstars of the British monarchy, albeit taking something of a sabbatical. And for William, truly, he cannot abide this woman. And there's two reasons, really. Disrespectfulness to his wife, Catherine, and that whole episode that she detailed in, of course, great lies over on the Oprah Winfrey Show. And more importantly, the way that Meghan truly disrespected the late Duke of Edinburgh and, of course, Her Majesty the Queen. She knew just what they were personally going through on a, medical level, health level, proceeded to carry on. William could never forgive that. Now, sources tell me that, maybe in years to come, he could be cordial with his brother, but not while he's attached to Meghan Markle. And Meghan, for now, clearly is going nowhere because, quite frankly, the billionaire club idea is going nowhere. And without that ticket to ride, as Paul McCartney famously said, what has she got? So she's going to cling on to that. But at some stage, it's going to be interesting because William, I've been told, is not going to be putting up with the same shenanigans and the easy life that His Majesty the King is doing, and rightly so because of his illness. What will happen will be a radical change, and I suspect that the line of succession will be cut. There'll be no level of interest in Lily or Archie, which is a shame for the children, and more importantly, William will definitely rule the monarchy in a totally different way. Meghan has no idea. She thinks it could all come back tomorrow. So does Harry. The future in the monarchy looks very stable. The future for Meghan and Harry on all levels, sadly for them, looks very bleak. But truly, whose fault is it? Neil Sean in the very heart of London.